and Chairman of Council, our patrons, council members, EXCO members, members of the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, and a warm welcome to our special guests, our distinguished ladies and gentlemen who are here with us today. The Economic Outlook is a program put together by the Programs Committee of the Chamber, a committee chaired by Mr. Tajuddin Ahmed. Mr. Ahmed currently serves as the Group Head of Business Development at the BUA, and he will be steering the wheel of this event. May we please welcome Mr. Tajuddin Ahmed. Thank you.
I didn't know I was supposed to be made this important. I'm sorry. Good morning, everyone. I'm seeing everyone looking radiant. It's a new year, and we all hope it's going to be a year of transformation for ourselves, both at private levels and at corporate levels. My name is Tajuddin Ahmed. I'm the chairman of the Programs Committee of the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, Nbcc. I'm pleased to physically and virtually welcome you all to this January breakfast meeting themed 2024 Economic Outlook. I'm particularly delighted to see our council and ESCO members, our distinguished speaker, Dr. Adedoyin Salami, the Jebu boy who read economics, the moderator, Mr. Bosin Amofaye, and all our esteemed guests. Please rise, ladies and gentlemen, as we observe the Nigerian and British national anthems. Seated. Did God save the King? As we're seated, before we begin, please allow me to state some housekeeping guidelines. For our physical attendees, questions will be answered during the Q&A session. Please raise your hands and a microphone will be brought to you. For those joining us virtually, if the volume is too low, kindly check the volume on your gadget, your system, etc. This event is being recorded and will be available live on our YouTube channel, Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, Nbcc. For questions, comments, and discussions, use the chat icon. And for posts on social media, kindly use the hashtag Nbcc Economic Outlook 24. Nbcc in capital. Economic Outlook, one word in small letters, and numeral 24. Thank you for listening. Please join me as we welcome the 18th President and Chairman of Council of Nigeria's foremost bilateral Chamber of Commerce, the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Ray Artley, FRPA, for his welcome address. May we honor our President, please.
Thank you. The Deputy President, past President patrons, council members, members of the Executive Committee, our guest speaker, our chief guest of honor, ably represented, our able moderator, members of the press, participants joining us virtually and from around the world, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to welcome you to the first event of the year of this chamber, the Economic Outlook 2024. This breakfast event has become a very important platform to set the tone for the new business year. We have in the room business leaders and experts of no mean repute who will share with us their interpretations of the policy pronouncements of government and how such policies and consequent actions may impact our business in the current business year. For the first time in 8 years, we have a new government in place with its own agenda. They have promised to renew our hope in a thriving Nigeria. And we do not have any doubt that they mean business. However, in fulfillment of our social mandate to keep an eye on the economy and to offer our support to government, without conditionalities, we have assembled this morning to rub minds and to review the facts and all indicators so that the experts can share with us what they see. We do not have predetermined conclusions. Neither do we have room for caustic sentiments or sensationalism. The stakes are too high for either. Let the facts and figures speak, and let our inferences and assumptions be based on the verifiable facts. Perhaps we may learn a thing or two today that will guide us in making vital changes in our business operations for the year. It is often the case that experts don't always agree, especially on economic matters. It won't be a surprise today if this continues. But all the same, even when superior knowledge collides, we shall be able to discern and live with a better understanding of the fundamentals. Perhaps some of the key questions agitating our minds in 2024 might include: 1, what exchange rate do we plan with? What will happen to tax rates, incentives, and other payables? Should we focus on bringing down inflation? How do we benefit from government intervention opportunities? Will this be accessible and timely? Will there be a significant improvement in our security situation so that cost of food and logistics services may come down? The intercity, long-haul transport sector and the tourism industry will most definitely be revived and more job opportunities created if this happens. Are we likely to pay more for petrol and diesel this year? How about the overall cost of power? Will it hold steady or go further up? Will it be a lot easier to repatriate proceeds in the aviation sector this year? I'm sure there are a lot more questions, and they will pop up, I'm sure, as well during the Q&A. At Nbcc, we are concerned and committed to making significant contributions towards the rapid transformation of this country. Every time the country called in the past, we always answered. 4 years ago, when COVID hit the world and millions were dying, businesses shutting down, the country called and the Nbcc answered. Many of our members, individually and collectively, put funds together, billions of naira, to support the initiatives of government. And I think we deserve a round of applause. Today, thankfully, we are not facing a pandemic. Yes, not in that sense. But with rising debts, high recurrent expenditure, dwindling revenue, and falling local currency exchange rate, we definitely must sense that it's not party time yet. A lot has to be done by the distinguished managers of our economy to restore order, spur growth, and incentivize the real sector to get the economy thriving again. We all will benefit from a prosperous Nigeria, I'm sure, including the non-Nigerians, so long as you have invested here. We'll all benefit. And so we must join hands, as always, with government as partners in progress to ensure that things work. You don't do this by keeping mum. We must always put our views across in non-incendiary manner and ensure that we don't wait until they stumble before we pounce, but help to forewarn and guide with our thoughts if they buy it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are truly honored to have you share your morning with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. May we applaud our President once more. So thank you, Mr. President, for that profound welcome address. The next on the agenda is our sponsors' video adverts. Without our sponsors, wouldn't have sat here this morning. First, with First Allied Capital, and followed by Capital Field Investment Group. Media, please.
Hi, I am Olumayowa Ogunwemimo, Group Executive Director of First Allied Capital Limited, and I welcome you to our world of innovation, commitment, and excellence. Since our inception in 2014, we have evolved, grown, and diversified our services to serve the varied financial needs of our partners, customers, and the nation. First Allied Capital is not just a company, it's a financial ecosystem. We provide corporate project financial advisory, wealth management, foreign exchange services, real estate, inclusive banking, and much more. Our team is dedicated to sustainable growth goals, utilizing digital technology to create value and deliver exceptional service. Now, let me introduce you to our powerhouses within the family, our subsidiaries. At First Allied Advisory, we offer expert guidance in capital markets, mergers and acquisitions, as well as project and structured finance. At First Allied Asset Management, we handle your wealth with care and precision. We offer a range of funds and customized wealth management services to meet your financial goals. For your retail foreign exchange needs, talk to us at First Allied Bureau de Change. We serve retail clients and travelers, ensuring seamless and reliable currency exchange. First Allied Properties excels in real estate development, offering services from acquisitions and advisory to property management. Your real estate ventures are our expertise. At Personal Trust Microfinance Bank, we empower local businesses and the underserved sectors of the economy with digital banking services. We are making First Allied Capital the best place for smart and ambitious people to thrive, and we invite you to join us on this journey towards greater accomplishment. Together, we will redefine the future of financial services.
Another busy day in the city of Lagos. Alex drops by his friend's street food joint and finds an empty, knocked-down shed. He's hoping to get tips from Kole as he struggles setting up his own fashion house. What he gets from Kole is a new business address. Kole's business had gone from a shanty cubicle to a flourishing restaurant.
Wow! It's long now.
With 2 decades of excellent service delivery in savings and investments to guarantee your future, loans, asset finance, asset management, and trade finance, giving ease to your business, and energy services, you don't have to struggle. Sign up with Capital Field Investment Group Limited today.
Sponsors, the first batch of the videos of our sponsors. We will appreciate First Allied Capital and Capital Field Investment once more. Now, you all agree with me that at the heart of the Nigerian economy, or any economy for that matter, is the central bank of that country or of that economy. And it's on that basis that I'm going to invite the next 30 seconds the Deputy Director, Microeconomic Analysis of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Ladi Raulatu Balakefi, MNI, member of the National Institute. Very few people have that appellation after their names. May you come up, Madam Deputy Director, to give us goodwill message on behalf of the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. May we appreciate her, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I know when they hear the central bank, we are in the front burner right now. Everybody wants to know where the dollar will go to. We should all pray. The NIP's motto, towards a better society. The president, vice president, Exco and council members, other dignitaries here present, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Ladi Raulatu Balakefi, MNI, and I will be presenting a goodwill message on behalf of the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Olayemi Cardoso. The prospect of the Nigerian economy in 2024 is influenced by various factors, including legacy issues from the performance of the domestic economy in 2023, as well as economic uncertainties emanating from the global economy. The outlook, therefore, lies at the intersection of domestic legacies and global uncertainties. On the one hand, the headwinds from 2023's sluggish growth and inflationary pressures still resonate, casting shadows on the path forward. On the global front, issues of economic slowdown and geopolitical tension add further complexity to the outlook. In this intricate landscape, the Central Bank of Nigeria remains a key player through its implementation of monetary and financial policies to steer the nation toward macroeconomic stability in 2024. the transition from a monetary targeting approach to an inflation targeting framework represents a pivotal shift with both potentials and risk. Examining this paradigm change alongside the interplay of domestic and global forces is crucial to understanding Nigeria's economic prospects in 2024. An overview of global developments revealed that global output growth has been significantly undermined by a combination of high inflation, dampened global trade, high global debt, rising geopolitical tension, disruptions to supply chains, as well as unstable capital flows. Contractionary monetary policy stance among most advanced central banks in response to high inflation has resulted in tighter global financial market conditions and significant outflow of funds from emerging market economies. These developments have led to the strengthening of the US dollar, exacerbating inflationary pressures, weakening currencies, and depleting external reserves in many emerging market economies, including Nigeria. Nigeria's policy environment, including monetary policy decisions, are largely shaped by developments at both the global and domestic fronts. Thus, the Central Bank of Nigeria continues to initiate proactive policy measures to address these challenges. I'll go now to the developments in the domestic economy. The domestic economy maintained a modest growth as real GDP grew by 2.32%, 2.51% and 2.54% in Q1, Q2, and Q3 respectively. Growth has mostly reflected sustained improvement in the performance of the non-oil sector and increased investment in the services sector. Capacity utilization has also improved to 52.29 and 51.59 between Q2 and Q3 in 2023. Tailwinds to the outlook are predicated on long-term impact of foreign exchange reforms and PMS subsidy removal on activities in the agriculture, manufacturing, and services sectors. It also includes sustained rally in crude oil prices, improvement in domestic crude oil production, gains of fiscal consolidation, and other reforms. Headwinds to the domestic outlook remain rising energy prices, external debt service obligations, subsisting security challenges, legacy infrastructural deficit, and tightening global financial conditions, as well as high inflation. Crude oil production cuts by OPEC and allied countries have contributed significantly to maintaining prices at levels higher than the budget benchmark for 2023. With the third quarter of 2023 recording an upward average daily production of 1.5 million barrels per day, but still lower than the budget benchmark of 1.6 million barrels per day. With reference to inflation dynamics, headline inflation increased to 28.92% in December 2023 from 28.20% in November, driven by food prices, while core inflation increased to 23.06% from 22.38% in November 2022 due to surge in the price of processed food by 0.54 percentage points to 11.58% in December 2023. The price index of processed food in the core basket was mainly associated with the high cost of energy products, impacting on logistics and manufacturing costs. However, its recurrence suggests a persistent behavior. Therefore, the bank is undertaking reforms, including unification of the exchange rate to stabilize exchange rate market, to stabilize the exchange rate, attract foreign investment, and reduce pass-through inflation. In addition, the bank has pronounced some policies and reforms to improve macroeconomic fundamentals and boost confidence in the Nigerian economy. And these policies include maintaining a tight monetary policy stance and the adoption of an explicit inflation targeting framework to enhance the effectiveness of its monetary policy vis-à-vis its core mandate of price and financial stability. Hence, its reliance on orthodox monetary policy instruments only. Likewise, there's a rollback of quasi-fiscal operations, which had hitherto clearly distracted the bank from achieving its core mandate and diverted its attention to areas where it clearly had limited expertise. Look, in 2024. And moderate to 25.1% for 2024. Potential shocks include external shocks. External shocks, exchange rate volatility, continued depreciation of the naira could lead to imported inflation, affecting the cost of goods and services. It might also increase the burden of external debt. Domestic shocks, fiscal challenges, which could be attributed largely to poor fiscal management, high government debt levels, or difficulties in revenue mobilization, could lead to budgetary constraints, limiting the government's ability to implement crucial development projects and support economic growth. Security challenges. Security challenges disrupt economic activities, discourages investment, and negatively affect agricultural and other key sectors of the economy. Infrastructure deficiency. Inadequate power supply, transportation, and telecommunication could hamper productivity and dampen investors' confidence. Climate change impacts. potential adverse effects of climate change on agriculture, water resources, and overall environmental sustainability. Extreme weather events like floods, droughts, or other natural disasters could impact agriculture, which plays a significant role in Nigeria's economy, potentially leading to food shortages and inflationary pressures. Policy challenges. Navigating trade-offs is an inherent challenge for central banks. Key areas where monetary policy needs to navigate trade-offs are inflation versus unemployment. Central banks often face a dilemma between controlling inflation and reducing unemployment. Tightening monetary policy to curb inflation may increase unemployment, while easing policy to stimulate employment could lead to higher inflation. Short-term stability versus long-term growth. Aggressive monetary policies aimed at stabilizing the economy in the short term may have long-term consequences, such as asset bubbles or unsustainable debt levels. Interest rates and asset prices. Low interest rates can stimulate economic activity, but may also lead to excessive risk-taking, asset bubbles, or overvaluation in financial markets. Credibility versus flexibility. Striking the right balance between maintaining credibility by adhering to established policy frameworks and being flexible to respond to unexpected economic developments. Central banks must ensure credibility in their policy decisions while adapting to evolving conditions, economic conditions. Financial stability versus monetary goals. Policies that support monetary goals may have unintended consequences for financial stability and vice versa. Policy options going forward. What are our options? On the monetary policy side, increase interest rates, possibly in a series of hikes, depending on inflation trajectory. This aims to curb credit growth and reduce money supply, dampening demand and inflationary pressures. On the flip side, it could also slow economic activity and increase borrowing costs for businesses. Policy coordination. The CBN intends to coordinate its monetary policy actions with the government's fiscal policy to ensure effectiveness and avoid conflicting signals. Transparency and communication. Clear and open communication about policy decisions and rationale for taking them are crucial for building market confidence and managing expectations. Evidence-based policy action. Closely monitor economic indicators and adjust policies as needed to respond to evolving circumstances. In conclusion, Nigeria's economic outlook for 2024 is faced with concurrent upside and downside factors. The external factors range from commodity price volatility and global economic conditions to rising geopolitical tensions, while the domestic risks include exchange rate volatility, fiscal challenges, and political issues. Although the bank has implemented several policies and reforms to enhance the country's short to medium-term economic prospects, a successful and well-coordinated execution of the various reforms is mandatory. The prioritized policy options will be implemented by the bank to ensure the achievement of its price and financial stability mandate. The bank has repositioned the Nigerian economy for greater performance through policies that will unlock the growth prospects of the economy, stabilize the investment environment for higher returns, and make Nigeria a choice destination for businesses and foreign direct investment. We would need bodies such as the Nbcc to assist us in undertaking our reforms and also to have faith in our policies. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Madam. May we applaud her again. Madam Ladi Raulatu Balakefi, PhD, MNI. Before she made her remarks, she did urge us to pray when she mentioned the issue of exchange rate, and everybody had a hearty laughter. I did as well. But we all know that prayer comes with responsibility, and it actually comes with work. So what she meant to say, I'm trying to rephrase what Dr. Ladi meant, is we should work and pray. And prayer shouldn't come before work. Okay, I saw that a few of our members, especially bankers, were taking notes very aggressively as she was speaking. Of course, you'll expect that if the CBN governor representative is speaking at an event, he should take notes. And I saw Bosin taking pictures. I hope Arise will make a meal out of whatever she had said this morning. Okay, next is our next sponsors videos. So at the Nbcc, if a tax man sponsors your event, it says a lot about that organization. Not just a tax man, the most aggressive internal revenue service in this country, Lagos Internal Revenue Service. They are one of our sponsors. We're tax compliant. We're a very special organization. Media, the sponsors advert video for Lagos Internal Revenue Service, the tax man.
Internet.
Start the new year right.
To all employers of labor in Lagos, you have until January 31 to file your annual tax returns. Visit etax.lirs.net and log in to your eTax profile using your company's taxpayer ID and password. Take notice that failure to file your company's annual tax returns on or before January 31, 2024 is a contravention of the extant provisions of the Personal Income Tax Amendment Act 2011, which attracts stiff penalties on defaulters. This message is from the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service, LIRS.
Now we're getting to the meat of the action. To read a short profile of our guest speaker before he goes ahead with his 30 minutes presentation. So on a personal note, I've known the guest speaker from a distance for over 20 years, but I got close to him from 2008 November. Now it's almost 16 years, when I left a certain bank to join another certain bank with the responsibility for corporate planning and strategy at that bank. So he was one of the seniors that helped me do my work at the time. So we agree on virtually everything with him, but one thing I would never, till the trumpet is blown, agree with him. So he supports a certain club in North London. They wear white jersey. They've never won anything in the last 42 years. 32 years, I beg your pardon. This club was formed in 1882. And when the English Division 1 transformed from Division 1 to Premier League in 1992, this club had won only 2 trophies. And the trophy they won, the most insignificant trophy in English football. You either called it a Carabao Cup, you called it the EFL Cup, or at the time you called it the Carling Cup, which they won in 1999 and 2008. That is the club our guest speaker supports in North London. They wear white. They are called the Lily Whites, and they're a poor cousin of a very illustrious other club in North London. Their wears red. There's no guessing who that club is. The Arsenal. 1-0 to the Arsenal. That is the club I support. So that's the only thing myself and the guest speaker could never agree about. The trumpet is blown on Judgment Day. Any other thing we agree? Okay, so I'm going to give a short, it's a 1-page profile of a guest speaker. Dr. Adedoyin Salami is a well-regarded Nigerian economist, a senior fellow and associate professor at the Lagos Business School of the Pan-Atlantic University. In 1989, well before some of us here were born, he obtained a doctorate, not me, but some people. In 1989, he obtained a doctorate degree in economics from Queen Mary College, University of London. He has built a career in consulting, establishing the research firm Edward Kingston Associates in 1997, where he was managing partner, which emerged with soft skills in 2014 to form Keynote Edge Consulting, a firm of economists and consultants, where he led the firm to build the macroeconomic model of the Nigerian economy. As a member of the adjunct faculty at the Lagos Business School, Pan-Atlantic University, where he leads sessions in economic and environmental business, his research interests include issues in corporate long-term financial management, microeconomic policy, corporate competitiveness and risk management, and characteristics of small and medium enterprises, SMEs. He was the chairman of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council, PEAC, that was constituted by former President Muhammadu Buhari. He was subsequently appointed the Chief Economic Advisor to the President, CEAP, at the twilight of the Buhari presidency in January 2022. Some of his other consulting engagements include assignments for Coca-Cola Nigeria and Equatorial Africa, DFID, World Bank, UNIDO, USAID, IFC, etc. His involvement with public policy making started in 2009 with his appointment by the late President Umaru Yar'Adua as a member of the economic management team of the federal government. In 2010, he was appointed to the membership of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, and retired from the MPC in 2017 after completing 2 terms. He also served as vice chairman of the new President Transition Committee in 2015 under the leadership of late Alhaji Ahmed Jodda. A member of the International Monetary Fund's IMF's Advisory Group for Sub-Saharan Africa, AXA, is also a member of the board of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG, and held the privilege of being the co-chair of the Central Organizing Committee for the Nigerian Economic Summit in 2009. Finally, Dr. Adedoyin Salami, the Ijebu boy who studied economics, has written extensively on the Nigerian economy. He was chairman of Prestige Assurance PLC and sits on the boards of UK-based African Business Research Limited, First World Communities, Diamond Pension Limited, custodian, and the vice chairman of FC4S, Financial Center for Sustainability Lagos. Please, I have the honor of bringing to the raised platform one of Nigeria's finest economists, a master strategist, and a well-sought-after speaker, Dr. Adedoyin Salami.
Well, a very good morning to you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Chamber, the Deputy President. I crave your indulgence to stand on established protocols. Well, he did say on Judgment Day, I'm not going to say where he will be on Judgment Day. We'll pass on that piece. You know, it's always interesting when you sort of spend a long time at the top of the league and then you eventually bottle it. I suppose you always have to find somebody else whose fate is hopefully worse than yours. But let me thank the Nbcc for the privilege of this morning's invitation. Why Tajo and the Nbcc executive chose me, I will leave them to worry about. But I already know that my choice was not exactly non-controversial. At least some of the feedback that I already have received says it's going to be an interesting morning. But I'm going to try and answer, or at least deal with 3 questions. And then in the Q&A, we can do whatever else we can. Sorry, the deck. Who's got the laptop? Oh, it's at the back. Ouch. Okay. So I'm afraid you're going to have to listen to me because, well, you can move it and we'll see how it goes. I normally prefer to move my own deck myself, but 3 things I'm going to address my comments to. Where is the economy? What might be its drivers going forward? Where might we? What are the possibilities for ending 2024? And then we can have a conversation around what the risks are and where the opportunities might lie. As far as I'm concerned, we start 2024, in my view, this is going to be a defining year. Let me actually preface my comments by thanking the central bank, because I think I was actually going to say, well, ladies and gentlemen, let's sit down and do Q&A and then let's go, because I think the central bank has provided a fairly broad-ranging outlook. I will add a few things here and there, crave your indulgence to forgive any repetitions, but life happens. And so, where are we? What might drive us? Where might we end up? Where we are is, as I say, it's a defining year ahead. And the reason I say it's a defining year ahead is that this administration in place has started on a path of reform. Some of these reforms perhaps might have happened a decade ago. But as they say, better late than never. Okay? First point to make about reform is that reform is not without a cost. And at the heart of, in my view, of the government's challenge is going to be how does it first sequence the reforms, second, manage the cost of reform. Because if nobody knows anything, fuel prices went up from 200 to 600. It's part of the reform. The president in his comment said, are we going to see higher fuel prices? That is a question that perhaps only government can answer. If I was to say anything, it would be in a liberalized market, your fuel price will be driven by three things and three things only. Three things only. The first is what's the price of fuel? The second, if we're importing it, what's the exchange rate? If we're not importing it, it depends on at what price the producers, now we have the Dangote refinery in operation. And of course, the third piece will always be taxation. Is there any taxes? And so ordinarily, if global crude oil prices move up and down, fuel prices will move up and down. By how much? It depends. And that's why I say that's where the policy makers' intervention. And some would argue that, look, part of the challenge we faced before now in not taking out fuel subsidy fully before it was done is simply that we ended up borrowing to pay subsidies. If you look at the numbers now, the FARC numbers have gone up quite significantly. And so when you say, where are we? At the beginnings of reform. But the context of the reform is an economy growing, let's not misunderstand that, growing, but unstable. Stability in any economy sits on a tripod. What's the tripod? It's a tripod that measures, first, where is your output? Is your output growing faster than your population? If your output is not growing as fast as your population, then income per head will come down. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. Indeed, I draw attention to something which I think that we might potentially benefit from. In 1990, Nigeria's income per head as an economy was bigger than that of China's. 1990. Nigeria was, I think, about 586. Please don't quote me specifically on this, but it's a ratio, roughly 586. The Chinese were about 380, thereabout. Today, even with a larger population, 5-6 times ours, they are headed $12,000. We are trying $2,000. What happened? It's very simple. They rode the third industrial revolution aggressively. That's what happened. And so that's the point about your productivity must be bigger, grow faster than your population. That's the only way you grow your income. So that's the first leg. Second leg, costs must be stable. And for Nigeria, indeed for most countries, there are two dimensions or two domains of cost. First is inflation, second is exchange rate. So that's why the point about exchange rate stability. You see, I'm not misunderstanding levels where people say, what's going to be the price of the exchange rate? Of foreign currency, because the price is the exchange rate. I'm much more particular about how stable is it? And typically what has happened to Nigeria is really very simple. We hold and then we drop. We hold and then we drop. Whereas what we perhaps need to see is an exchange rate that is more in tune with the forces of demand and supply. Please don't misunderstand me. Every country in the world manages its exchange rate. How they do it is a different matter. But nobody, quote unquote, leaves exchange rates, to do whatever you like. It's a very important price. And so for me, what's important is that stability. By the way, for most of us here, we would like a strong currency. Why? Our obligations We have significant obligations in non-Naira. We have significant non-Naira obligations. But guess what? As the currency strengthens, so do you export jobs. Because a strong currency affects your competitiveness. It's important to understand this, that yes, for me personally, I would like the Naira to be very strong. Why? I have school fees to pay. There are medicals to pay. There are house mortgages to service. But if this economy is going to grow the number of jobs that it needs, the UN projects that we're going to be 400 million plus people by 2050. Question is, where will you find the jobs? And let me be very clear, Nigeria's job prospects are to be found in building a robust agro-industrial complex. Please understand that. What does that mean? We've got to build an agro-industrial complex where agriculture provides the feedstock for manufacturing. One of the fundamental weaknesses of where we are today, when you look at the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics numbers, only 6% of Nigeria's labor force is in the formal sector. 93% or thereabout is in the informal sector. So you need to begin to formalize this economy. We need to understand that informal sector, by the way, but we need to formalize the sector, the rest of the economy, so that that's the only way government intervention can actually be more deliberate and more effective. But as I was saying, stability is three things. Output growth, driven in part by productivity. Price stability, which is why I would argue that the central bank's shift of focus to managing inflation is probably the best thing that they can do. And they must be supported. It's going to be hard. Please let nobody misunderstand this. If inflation is about 29% and you're going to bring it down, I don't know, you don't have to be an economist, but I suspect that many people in this audience either read O.A. Lawal or read Professor Terry, read Professor Teriba, yes, Professor Teriba of the University of Ibadan, either in secondary school, and they taught you at least one thing. It's either too much money chasing too few goods. Abi? If you didn't remember any other thing, you remember that. So it's the same thing. If you want to bring prices down, you're either going to increase supply, or you're going to reduce demand, or you're going to do both. In the short term, it is easier to reduce demand. Why? Because to increase supply requires investment, which then grows the economy. There is a lag. And that's one of the key points that I think it's important for the government itself to make on a continuing basis. Reform offers us a lifeline, but it takes a time. It's important. The third piece of stability is a strong external account. As it is, I was happy to see Business Day write the other day that Nigeria is not an import-dependent country. She isn't. Imports in Nigeria amount to about 12% of GDP. Ghana is double that. Morocco is 4 or 5 times that figure. But we need to be able to export. And to do so, I go back. A globally competitive agro-industrial base is what Nigeria must build. So that's where we're starting from. An economy growing, costs rising, but must build an agro-industrial base. What else do I want to tell you before I move on to the outlook? Perhaps the biggest challenge that I see facing the administration, the country, the very simple one. The gap between inflation in Nigeria and the US and the gap between inflation and returns here. Do the numbers now. Sorry, can you move this forward a bit? Let me see whether I can get to that. Go on. Go on. Don't worry, you get all of this. Go on. Go on. Go on. Go on. Hold on. Go. No, go on. Go on. Go on. Go on. Go on, let me see whether it's the next one. Yes, that's it. Now, forgive me, I hope I can move away from here. Thank you. Well, you see, as an academic, you always have to find a board. Now, look at this. This is Nigeria's inflation. The red is the US's inflation. That gap, when people say, what's going to happen to the exchange rate? I say, I don't know. I don't ever predict exchange rates. If I wasn't taught anything in economics at master's and postgraduate level, I was taught never to predict oil prices and predict exchange rates. So I don't. But I can tell you, economics is very clear about what's going to happen. Or, no, not what's going to happen, what should happen. Policy can intervene to ensure it doesn't happen. But look at that gap. You're looking at 29, you're looking at 3. The gap is 26. What it says is essentially the Naira has to move. There's something called the law of one price. The Naira has to move to cover that gap. Which is why the central bank's determination to reduce inflation must be supported. Because unless you bring that green line south, the weakness of the Naira is going to be very difficult to stem. And by the way, just in case you are all looking and saying, what happened? What happened is not difficult to understand. Liquidity, money supply, grew last 8 years, on average, 14-15% per annum. Output growth was 1.2% per annum. Go back to O.A. Lawal. Too much money chasing too few goods. I hope you understand me. That's the challenge. And by the way, look at the graph below. What that is showing you, it's not that difficult to understand. On the one hand, all the red pieces are bond yields in different countries. All the blue pieces are inflation. Look at Nigeria, inflation well above bond yields. I hope you can see that. So I've already shown you this one, which says if it's like this, the currency is likely to move in a particular direction, so don't be surprised people are looking for foreign currency. But look here, if yields are significantly lower than inflation, then why do you want to keep your money in Naira assets? Again, it goes back to that point about the imperative of managing aggressively inflation downwards. It's going to be painful, but in my view, we have no real choice. Okay? So, but then, so that's where we are. That's the definition of the context into which we have entered 2024. So the question now is, what's going to drive 2024? Can you go back a bit? There's a map of Nigeria I left there somewhere. Go and look for that. Yeah, that's it. Anybody who's listened to me in the last God knows how long, so if you've seen this before, forgive me, life kind of happens. This is just my own view of the world. Nigeria's conditions are affected by global stuff and domestic stuff. The global stuff, policy, trade, capital flows, diaspora transfers. The domestic stuff, activity costs, but at the heart of it is policy. So now let's move forward. Move the slides forward. Go on, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep moving it. Go on. Go on, go on, go on. Right, okay. So what I've said to you is global things, local things. What are going to be the global things? Well, the year ahead is looking rather interesting. Democracy is going to be under test this year. I'm told there are about 70 plus elections around the world. And that these 70 plus elections will have national populations of about 4.2 billion people voting. So this is probably the first year in a long time when half of the world will be voting for leaders. Now, whether democracy delivers governance, that's a but that's the first point to make. And why do I make that point? Because artificial intelligence and its use or misuse could really play a very interesting role in that. But the piece that I am more concerned about are the pieces on the diplomatic side. Because the world is seeming to me to move away or to move in the direction of less peace. We've been talking about Russia, Ukraine, now we're talking about the Middle East, potentially globalizing a conflict. We're beginning to talk about China, US tensions on the back of Taiwan. There are some interesting pieces that I think everybody needs to take cognizance of. As businesses, cyber attacks. I was just reading The Economist this morning, and there was a report from Davos. I forget which of the global investment banks was reporting that 15 billion attacks on their system by hackers. And I was like, Jeremy, I wonder where my little Naira notes are kept. But cybersecurity becomes important, because I see here we don't really pay that much attention to cybersecurity, but I think it's going to be interesting. What else? Yes, the great Donald. This is going to be another interesting year. The Americans are going to help us end the year either in, I don't even know what. But what's also clear to me already is that the US elections are going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of interference in it. But then, as I sometimes say, well, a little interference never killed anybody. But the point is this: I think it's going to be a very close election. And I don't think it's going to be won in the way that we would like it to be clearly won. I think it's going to be very close. I don't know who's going to win it, but since we know one person will wear red, the other will wear blue, life happens. And we hope that those who come to a podium wearing gray, claiming to support red, will this time be on the right side of the action. Now let's move on a bit. What do I think is going to happen in terms of the global economy? Remember I said it affects the domestic economy. The global economy is slow. The rate of growth globally is still looking at about 2.5%. And guess what? 2.5% is historically very low. Indeed, 2.5% is almost a global recession. And the key countries that are really pulling their weight, the Americans, surprisingly, we didn't expect them to do what they have done in 2023, but we expect that the American economy will cool down in the course of 2024. The simple reason, monetary policy is tight and it's going to remain tight. The Chinese have their own problems, still growing at about 5%, but with the asset bubble in the real estate market, it's not doing the kind of 6-7% that we've been used to. The one country that seems to be actually pulling its weight, really, at the moment is India. The Indians are really growing. For Africa, we're looking at, I think, an average of about 3.5%, just under 4% is what the African average looks like. But global inflation is still high. It's coming down, by the way. It was 9, it's come down to 6, but even at 6, it's still higher than what it was pre-COVID, which is why global monetary policy is likely to remain tight. Global monetary policy remains tight. If you're looking to so you have two questions to ask yourself. One, what happens to the Naira? But an even more interesting question is what happens to the dollar? Not against the Naira, but against other currencies. What happens to the dollar will depend on when or if the US Fed starts to cut its rates. How quickly, how deeply. When that cut starts, the dollar will weaken. But for as long as that cut doesn't start, and US interest rates still remain, as the analysts would say, elevated, then in my view, the dollar's strength will be maintained. Domestically, what's going to happen? Again, what I have seen are projections that range from about 2.8 to 3.7%. So I'm going to stay in the middle. I don't forecast any of these things. I'll take 3%. But all that the projections are saying domestically is very simple. We're likely to move away from a diminishing income per head. Because remember what I had said earlier. Imagine a cake. The cake is growing at about 2.5% was the figure for the year so far. And the population that will consume it is growing at 3%. Then it must mean every partaker of that cake will get a smaller slice. It's as simple and as straight. That's what diminishing per capita income really means. What I expect us to get to this year is where that diminution stops, where we see GDP growth hopefully matching at least, but preferably exceeding population growth. As for inflation, inflation should come down. And the central bank said to us, look, the IMF's projection is that the average inflation rate for 2024 is going to be about 22%, and that it will end the year at 15%. That's the IMF's projection. Why? Because the central bank is going to tighten up. Tightening up by the central bank means you're going to see higher interest rates. Indeed, what I would like to see is an inverted yield curve. Why? Normally in economics, yield curves are upward sloping. But I would like to see an inverted yield curve. Why? Because I'd like it to be high at the short end and lower at the medium to long end to support investment. Now, that one is great to need. If the government believes that what I'm saying is correct, or if that's the way they're happy to go, they're going to have to figure a way of creating an inverted yield curve in order to support growth whilst at the... So in other words, what I'm trying to do is say, look, is there a midpoint where we're able to not choose between fighting inflation and growing the economy? And my suggestion would be, if you can get an inverted yield curve, then with not, as I say, yield curve upward sloping, this one upward sloping at the short end, and then downward sloping at the middle point, and then can do whatever it likes beyond that. So inflation down, but it's not going to start immediately. Probably still for the next 2 months or so, we'll still see the impact of rising inflation. What else? Exchange rate. Well, everybody is jumping up and down about exchange rate. I've told you, there are two things. If you're looking for a dashboard, there are two things to look at for exchange rates. First, look at the inflation differential between the naira and the dollar. The other thing you can look at, if you like, is the interest rate differential between the naira and the dollar. The only reason I don't bother about that is very simply that the interest rate differential is based on an assumption that capital flows are unhindered. Now, that I'm not saying there are no official policies to hinder it, but there are obstacles in markets. And that's one of the things that the central bank has also said. Expect this year to see reform to the foreign exchange markets. Now, the nature of those reforms and their success, in my view, will be very important and pivotal in determining what happens. What else? Yes, you should expect to see higher wages. As it is, there is a National Minimum Wage Act of 2019. That was the one that raised minimum wages to 30,000. As you know, there's no way you look at it. Sorry, can you move this forward a bit? Almost to the end. There's a graph that I thought I hope I left it there. Go on. Yeah. So that set of columns on the left-hand side, that's what has happened to minimum wages. So minimum wages have been eroded, depending on how you look at it. Whether you look at it from the perspective of inflation, or you look at it, the red line is from the perspective of exchange rates. And so my expectation, and I think the government already announced this in the early days, that they were already looking to review
wages. I think there were meetings with the trade unions. So we'll wait and see what those bring. But you should expect to see higher wages. So what then is that summary for the outlook? Growth a bit better than where we are. Inflation lower than where we are. Our external trade hopefully surplus, because oil prices, the oil price futures for the average for 2024 is $82 a barrel. That's better than the benchmark in the budget. But one thing though, sorry, can you go back? Which is the challenge that Nigeria must meet. Go back, go back, go back, go back. Just continue, I'll tell you when to stop. Because keep going back. Go back, go back, go back, go back, go back. Yeah, stop. No, go back, yeah. So, the top right-hand side, that's our oil production in blue. That's our OPEC quota. In red, yes. For as long as we are below our OPEC quota, then the challenge of meeting foreign exchange and revenue challenges made more difficult. So for me, one of the key things that I am hoping to see this year is the sustained, because you will see towards the end, those oil production bars actually seem to be going up with the exception of the last one. So hopefully if we can get to where our OPEC quota is and perhaps even do better than that, then it kind of eases some of the challenge. So what does this say in total? That in the immediate short term, the outlook is actually, even though we don't like it, dependent on oil. That we need oil production to rise, the revenues therefrom to provide the dollars that the economy needs to fund itself. And by the way, let me also make the point, because sometimes everybody jumps up, this thing about exchange rate, I think sometimes we need to understand it in a bit more contextual terms. The Central Bank of Nigeria is 38% of the foreign exchange supply into Nigeria. Now, careful, and doing salami, careful, careful. If you look at the data, and I looked at the data from 2008 to 2022, so it's an average over sort of like a 12, 14-year period, that the non-central bank sources of supply are actually bigger than the central bank. Okay? The only thing, though, is the central bank is the biggest single pot. Now, I'm sure those of my friends here who are bankers already understand where I am going with this, but we'll leave it there. But the key point for me is that Nigeria does have some built-in resilience. The key question is going to be, what do we do to stimulate confidence and enable the flow of foreign currency? So at the heart of 2024, in my view, is a need for government to enhance confidence in this economy. So where are the opportunities? Well, now I can go to MBA class mode. That one is not very hard. Ask yourself, which are the largest sectors in the Nigerian economy? The largest sectors are those sectors where the largest amount of activity takes place. It's a simple and a straightforward answer. Which are the fastest growing sectors in the economy? Well, what's the difference? The difference is simple. The fastest growing are the largest amount of new activity. And so if you're one of those who say, okay, so where do we go from here? Well, remember what I said earlier, an agro-industrial complex. Agriculture. And agriculture, year to date 2023, 0.6% growth. Population, 3.1% growth. You got a problem. So when the president declares a food emergency, a food security emergency, there is no joke about it. But how do you raise supply without raising production? That's the fun part. Guess what? Nigeria's, what do you call this? Post-harvest losses in agriculture, depending on which crop you're talking about, ranges between 30 and 60%. So in other words, it's actually quite possible to raise supply, to raise supply without raising production. That's number one. Number two, Nigeria's capacity for storage, because that's where the post-harvest losses go. Nigeria is the best numbers I have seen. Say we have the capacity to store maybe between 2 and 4% of what we produce. Now that can cut it. South Africa, if I remember the figures correctly, is 114% of what she produces. So the question is going to have to be, who are those entrepreneurs who are able to see the assets that are rotting away in the countryside and able to bring them back into production, or into utilization? Remember my point, an agro-industrial complex. It's when you put something on the ground as a factory, and say this thing can produce, can process 30 tons a day. Oh yeah, let them supply the 30 tons a day. Today they will, tomorrow they will, day after tomorrow you're beginning to struggle. That's one of the key challenges. So for me, agriculture. Second, notwithstanding what we may say, Nigeria's growth is going to need energy. The energy sector, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's electricity, becomes integral. And so the efforts to restructure DISCOs, to restructure the transmission grid, the new laws that enable sub-grids to be built, state-level grids, I think are measures in the right direction that now need to be catalyzed. Look, the entirety of what we produce nationally, 5 gigawatts. What we need, the benchmark is 1 gigawatt per million people. So even if you say conservatively Nigeria is 170 million people, let's leave the 200 million. And by the way, that takes me to another point, which I shouldn't forget. We need a population census at some point, hopefully soon. Okay? But going back, 1 gigawatt per million people, that's a minimum of 170 gigawatts of power. We're currently doing 6. Question, I was reading this morning, electricity subsidy, 1.6 trillion. Interesting. But the key question is, some pieces of the electricity market will have to be subsidized. It's the no one left behind piece. But the rest of us are going to have to pay. And that now takes me back to where I started. I said reform is at a cost, and that the government will have to manage that cost. But guess what? It's you and I who are here, who are best able to bear that cost of reform. But you know what's also going to happen? We are the ones who are going to scream the loudest and try to avoid the cost of reform, but insisting that reform must happen. It is well. It is well with our soul. It's okay, it's okay. We're all right, last. You shall just calm down. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in my view, you will get this deck, and depending on the questions you ask after this, I may have to amend it a bit just to take account of those questions. But my point is a very simple one, ladies and gentlemen. First, yes, we've entered 2024, unstable. By the way, sorry, can you go, let me see, where is it? Go back up. There's something, go. No, then go down. Sorry, forgive me. Go down. Yeah. No, go back. Yeah. So this is Nigeria's instability diagram. And as you can see, look at where our best place was for stability. 2013, 2014. Look at where we are today. What we need this index to do is to go down in the direction of the green. What we don't want it to do is to go up in the direction of the red. Well, what we, I suppose, may make do with is for it to go eastwards. But my suggestion is, as we see inflation come down, it will go in the green. And so it's an unstable economy. Reform can restore stability. In the next 12 months, for me, it's a defining period, but that definition is first and foremost about restoring economic stability. Once we're able to restore economic stability, then we can build on top of that. As far as this year is concerned, as I said, growth a bit better than last year. Inflation or costs a bit lower than the year before. Our external trade performance, hopefully a bit better as long as oil prices, nothing happens to them to bring them down. Right now, all the things, even though we don't like them, war in the Middle East, the Houthis shelling the Red Sea, and yeah, okay, it's bad. But then, it's good for some. Where do you find opportunities? First things first, 2 principles that I will suggest for reflection. 1, keep what you have. That's the defensive strategy. Keep what you have. In other words, how do you prevent yourself from losing value? Especially given the point about inflation, even though it will come down, is still higher than yields. I was shocked the other day when I was preparing this piece. Commodity markets in Nigeria are producing yields around in excess of 45%. And I was like, that's interesting. Actually, why did I tell you that? I probably shouldn't. But anyway. So it's to see where those pockets of opportunity are still to be found, and they are there, but you need to look at the data in order to understand them. And finally, go towards the last piece. Go on. Go on. Thank you. This is a piece that I enjoy, even though it's a bit dated, because the last piece is 2019 and we're in 2024. But look at some changes that have happened. From being an economy where almost, well, it's not almost, 2/3 of our income was spent on food, we've come down to about 56% in 2019. I would argue that perhaps some of these might have gone up, but it's certainly not back here. That's number 1. Number 2, look at some interesting changes. Education from 0.2 to 3.9 to 6% of household spending. What's that saying? People understand that the intergenerational price of success is school fees. So parents haven't been nearly so successful. They are happy to pay, or at least they will try to pay for their children to get a better start. Well, I don't do religion, so you will forgive this next comment, because I know those who are already calling the judgment day, well, actually, as I move towards this, I can see pastors that I would rather not offend. But anyway, for today, they will have to forgive my sins. Health, from 1.4 to 3% to 6.1. So everybody wishes to sit on the right-hand side of whoever they believe, but nobody wants to die yet. So again, you are seeing people spending money on health. So the point I'm making is when you sit down and look at data like this, then you begin to understand that the economy in Nigeria actually does carry its opportunities. The key question is, do you know how to find it? And if you do you know how to take advantage of it? Thank you very much and good morning.
Without prompting, could we give him another round of applause? That was a sobering yet expectant and profound 35-minute presentation by Dr. Salami. Sobering in the sense that there's so much to do. Expectant in the sense that we could do better and the opportunities for us to do better. Okay, at the chamber we have premium members, and we just thought this is an opportunity for us to allow some of our premium members to talk. And this is going to be very short. Every premium member will speak for only 2 minutes. We have the videos, just 3 minutes of another batch of sponsors, Odua Investment Company Limited, Tangerine, and Standard Chartered Bank before the Q&A session for 50 minutes. The first to speak on behalf of the CEO of First Bank, Dr. Shola Adedunton, is the ED Chief Finance Officer, Mr. Patrick Iyamabo, who used to be my colleague in my previous calling in Arthur Anderson. Patrick, please come and speak with us. Hey, we'll give him a round of applause.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. I think we've had very interesting discussions from Dr. Salami and Ms. Ladi from the Central Bank. I'm not sure there's too much you can add to that. But here's what I'll say. The key message, at least one of the key messages out today, is really that inflation is a 200-pound gorilla in the room. If you now next inflation to interest rates and exchange rates, then we're looking at a very interesting year ahead. Interesting could be good or bad. For businesses, our viewpoint, and we get to see lots of businesses because of the nature of what it is we do and the reach we have. For businesses, you would have to think a lot more creatively about how you do business. Watch very closely your various cost inputs. Think strategically about where you play. Dr. Salami has shared some of those insights. Think about how you price. And very, very importantly, your cash management cycle. And by extension, the institution you partner with. You need to work really closely and more transparently with your banker. Your banker can help make the difference for you. Now, at a time like this, SMEs are usually the most vulnerable, and it's easy to look past them. But at First Bank, we do have plethora of solutions for SMEs, from our SME Connect, which is what offers tools to help SMEs better understand the operating environments and how to succeed, to the different cash management, trade solutions, even loans that are defined by sector to meet the various sectorial needs that Salami just spoke about. Agro loans, trade, manufacturing, very specific stuff. Again, times might look tricky, but look to your banker. They have solutions that can help you transverse this interesting time. And for the wholesale businesses as well, we've spoken about, or we've discussed the different sectors. Our viewpoint in First Bank, and the viewpoint of bankers generally, is to seek to be the trusted business advisor of customers. Again, at a time like this, we see what's going on around. We have the vast experience. We will be your trusted advisor. And for the different sectors, whether it's agri, we spoke about food security just now, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's driving export-oriented opportunities, whether it is trade, push, give this your very best shot, we are there to stand by you. Just to summarize, I know Tajuddin is standing. Just to round up, here's a takeaway I would like to leave behind. No matter how interesting times are, you would always have the institutions that fare even better. The opportunities are there. We just need to know how to take them on and work with your bankers to make sure this happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. May we appreciate Patrick again. For Patrick, First Bank is a premium member. However, with the speech you just rendered, expect our invoice as early as 9 a.m. tomorrow. Okay, so the next premium member to speak out of the three, representing the country managing partner and CEO of PwC, is Mr. Pedro Owotume, partner, clients, and markets leader, West Africa and the head of energy of PwC. I hope Pedro is not going to market PwC too.
I will not do that. Thank you very much, Dr. Salami. I think that was quite insightful. My two comments will be around the energy space where I play. So Nigeria, we all know, is an oil-producing country. And if you look at our revenues as a country, I would think about half or thereabouts is projected to come from oil revenue. And we know that the OPEC has given us a quota of about, she said 1.5 million barrels a day or 1.6 million barrels a day. And when we look at Dr. Salami's presentation, our production is actually ramping up to get to that number. But my worry is, as a country, our population is growing. So if you do production per person, total production, 1.5 times 365, you get a number. You look at our total population, compared to, for example, Saudi Arabia, that does 10 million barrels a day, and their population, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, or even come to Africa, Algeria, Angola. When you look at their population, Angola, for example, and Algeria, that's close to our production per day and the population, and you do that ratio, Nigeria is not a very rich country. I hate to say it that way, from the oil point of view, which is why I like the agricultural agric sector you brought in to say, maybe we have to focus on this oil and gas. Maybe we should look at something else. Okay, so just do that number, just food for thought, to say if currently, even at our budget, you have a budget deficit, okay, and you've been having this budget deficit for a long time. And my problem with budget deficit is that it's not just the deficit to the GDP ratio, but even the servicing of it, because your servicing is now over your revenue. And some countries have gone into default. And it's projected that this year, more countries will go into default. I'm not saying Nigeria will, but that's the projection from the economist. So from our oil and gas point of view, I would say, look, we as a country, we need to diversify. We need to look for other sources. You heard about what happened in Ibadan the other day about whether it was illegal miners or whatever miners. Maybe we need to look for other sources other than oil and gas. So as a country, we know that our base is strong enough to cater for this population. Second point is, and you kind of mentioned about doing a population census. I'm just thinking, is there a policy that deals with reducing the population or stabilizing the population? So that because it's like we're just taking it for granted. We're going to grow to 500 million people. I say, where are we going? Where did Can we actually serious as a country think about maybe it's time to say enough, too much children, or too many, I'm just thinking. I think that's something we need to do. Third point, and I'll go and sit down and take my 2 minutes up. Third point is to say it's good to focus on an annual budget, but I think as a country we need to ensure that our annual budget ties with our long-term goals. So that if you're asking me to take some pain and some heat this year, I can see where we are going ultimately. And it's not that we have a government that is we're just 1 year old and all fingers being equal or things being equal. We are hoping that they'll do 8 years. Can we actually have an 8-year plan and how each of these annual budget fits into that 8 years plan, so we know that we're going to get out of the dark tunnel at the end of the road. Thank you so very much. I'm not marketing PwC, but you know who to come to.
Thank you, Pedro. May we appreciate Pedro once more for that insightful comments on our population, on energy, and the economy at large. Finally, I have here to speak another premium member, the CEO, MD CEO of Wakanao. The delectable, pardon me for using that phrase because it's the only lady amongst the CEOs speaking, Nike Macaulay, please. We appreciate Nike. Don't market travels, we're not Jack behind.
I'll try not to. Good morning, everyone. Permit me to stand on existing protocol. And thank you, Dr. Salami, for that excellent address. I'll tell you one key thing that I took away from it is that reform is not without a cost. And if there is any industry that has continued to pay the cost of the reforms in the latter part of last year, it's the aviation and travel industry. I'm glad that we have British Airways in the room because we know about the airlines that have over $1 billion, I think it's over $1 billion now, in funds trapped that they haven't been able to repatriate due to the limited forex supply. And from all we hear, it seems like we will continue to pay this cost in 2024, whilst we wait for the impacts, the positive impacts of these monetary policies to crystallize. Now, what I ponder about, and I know there's a Q&A session after this little speeches, my question and what I continue to ponder on, and I wrote it down, is whilst bearing this unavoidable cost of reforms, and Dr. Salami spoke about instilling confidence in investors in the economy, how do we also stimulate confidence in the aviation sector, particularly within international airlines that we solely depend on today for air connectivity between Nigeria and the rest of the world? How do we stimulate confidence in this sector, being that air connectivity is a significant pillar in driving economic growth? A question I would like us to ponder on as I step away, as we secure what we have, because that was another takeaway, saying hold what you have, but go chase for opportunities that data is pointing you to in different industries beyond the oil and energy sector. As we all do this, Wakanaw as a business is positioned to support your mobility needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We really appreciate Nika Macaulay, MD CEO of Wakanaw. Okay, the next thing before the big one, which is the Q&A session, is to get messages from our sponsors. And this is a final batch of sponsors videos. We have 3 team batch: Odua Investment Company Limited, Tangerine, and Standard Chartered Bank. Media, please. Odua Investment first.
Odua Investment Company Limited is a conglomerate and an investment holding company owned by the 6 southwest states of Oyo, Ondo, Ogun, Osun, Ekiti, and Lagos. Real estate, agriculture, energy, hospitality, ICT, logistics, financial services, and healthcare sectors. With subsidiaries such as Wemabot Limited Real Estate, Stratco Limited Agriculture, Glanville Enthevin Financial Services, E&O Power and Equipment Leasing Limited Power Solutions, and Lagos Airport Hotel. Guided by our strategic thrust, Odua Investment creates sustainable long-term value through strategic alliances and joint ventures that are targeted at optimizing existing assets, revitalizing underperforming entities, and establishing new ventures to explore emerging opportunities. With a history of successful partnerships with entities like Lafarge, Nigerite, and Wema Bank, we continue to thrive on building partnerships that work. For example, through real estate partnerships such as Address Home, Ikoyi, Lagos, and Westlake Iconic Estate, Alakia, Ibadan, and joint venture arrangements such as Premier Hotel Redevelopment, the world-class hospitality project. Odua Investment is always open to partnerships with technically and financially capable local and foreign companies who are willing to partner with us to redevelop and manage our other strategically located hotels assets. We develop our prime residential and commercial real estate through Wemabot Limited and leverage our vast agriculture land, social capital, and government ownership to build transformative businesses across our focus sectors. Partner with Odua Investment today as we build legacies for the future generation.
We are Tangerine Africa, a diverse collective of audacious thinkers, driven to give businesses the backbone to compete and thrive by protecting their best asset, people. Inspired by the lifetime challenge to constantly design better and more accessible ways to preserve the things they love and safeguard the dreams of the ones they cherish. Stirred by the mission to achieve a financially secure future for everyone across Africa, no matter the stage of life they are in.
We give them a round of applause again. So, Dr. Salami, I wish to bring you to the podium. Again, may we clap for Dr. Salami as well. So this is the meat of the event, Q&A, where you can throw all manner of darts at Dr. Salami. No holds barred, not at all. May I call to the podium someone who is very well known on TV with a 33-year experience in the media space, Mr. Bosin Omofai. Come do your job.
Good morning, everyone in the room. Thank you very much for being here. Dr. Louis Salami, thank you very much. It's good to have you here. And making you to sit over there is deliberate. And that's because those who premium members are here, so I'm sitting where the money is. So you sit there where you're doing the great talks and all that, and we can share. I love this company I keep because I can see folks who've made money so much this year from the stock market despite inflation, 2023, 2024. And as you were delivering your presentations, and I was thinking, when Nicodemus came in the night and others said, look, and the people came around and said, look, Lord, we've heard everything you've said. What can we do to get saved? And everyone in the room here, I'm sure, are asking themselves, what do we get from all of this? Now, I don't want to ask you so many questions. Because I sat at one event a few years ago, and you spoke about a gentleman who is an economist that you wanted to employ. Why are you smiling? Now you know I caught you, right? And you look at the gentleman's CV, and you looked at him and asked him a very simple question. How did you get here? And the gentleman looked up, and the young man looked up and said, how did I get here? And you said, if you can't explain to me how you get here into this room, then I can't employ you as an economist in my firm. So the most important question is, how did we get here? But I think everyone in the room and those online have a very fair idea of how we got here. So I'll go from how we get here to where we're going and how we need to get there. And as much as FX, inflation, and everything else is a big elephant in the room, population is a major elephant in the room. And you talked about productivity and balancing productivity and population vis-a-vis our GDP, vis-a-vis jobs, vis-a-vis infrastructure provision, and how we share the wealth, while taking care of those who are old and those who are young, and those who are yet unborn. It's a very delicate balance. Give me your thoughts on how we can balance and we can work around population, because every agency, the World Bank, the IMF, the WEF, everyone is talking about population issue for emerging and frontier economies around the world. And we can't just pretend that if we grow to be 400 million, whatever people, we're going to get an award somewhere for being the most populous country in the world. But we've seen India now pushing China aside and using the population demography. So should we contain, or we should simply move on and work very hard and hoping that when we get 400 million people, we would have food on the table for each and every one of them? What do you think?
Right. Thank you very much indeed. So shall I take it that I'm answering the question on population, or also how did we get here? Okay, just population, that's fine.
Yes, that's just a background.
All right, thank you, grateful. My view is really very simple. And it's probably biased by the fact that I have spent most of my working career in education. And that view is that education is how we manage population. And let me explain it. Imagine for a moment, just imagine for a moment, that Nigeria was able to have all her children, boys, girls, those identifying as anything else, in school. what that immediately does is that it slows down, or actually raises the age at which childbearing begins. Imagine for a moment that we were able to emplace an education system that keeps children in school at least until the ages of 16, but preferably 18. That then slows down the age, and I would argue it probably puts a minimum of 5 years into that gap as between when young girls, having hit puberty, actually begin to have children. That's the first piece, because they are in school. The second piece about education is that it also enables these young girls and their families make better choices. Because one of the key dimensions of our education, of our population characteristic that we must pay attention to is our life expectancy. And guess what? Nigeria's life expectancy isn't suffering at the top, it's actually suffering at the bottom. It's if you make it past the age of 5, your longevity is going to be almost what it should be. And so, child mortality is really one of the bigger challenges that we face. And in my view, if you achieve that widening of the gap between when young girls start having children now and when, as I say, if we can get it to 18, then you make it a lot easier to manage population growth. But that will then require that Nigeria needs to revisit what is the role of government. Because I'm very clear. I've always been, and anybody who's familiar with whatever I have done will understand this, that the government, in my view, has a number of responsibilities. Probably 3 of them are key. The first is to ensure that it provides a secure environment. It doesn't matter whether it is security from external aggression outside our borders or maintenance of law and order. The second is that it must work towards ensuring that Nigerians, irrespective of their circumstances of birth, have access to high-quality education up to a point. By the way, please don't misunderstand me. Yes, free education for the beneficiary doesn't mean education is free. It's got to be paid for from taxes. So we need to understand that. But it should be that anybody, irrespective of your circumstance of birth, that there is a quality and level of education that the system, society enables you to. That is when you begin. Sometimes younger folk ask, what is it exactly that we're getting from Nigeria? You people older than us say we should be patriotic. What is it that we are getting? And in my view, that is an area where some thinking and work needs to go. The third piece, just a minute, the third piece of this population and government responsibility piece is a very simple, it's one thing for the environment to be secure. It's another thing for people to be able to see opportunity, because that's where my argument on education actually goes. Being able to see the opportunities, because education is of a practical nature that enables that ability. The third piece is being able to then take advantage of that opportunity. In other words, for me, healthcare, up to a certain age, really the government needs to think through how do we get this done. Many things beyond that, I would argue, you can either get the private sector to do it, or you can get the government to do it and recover its costs. But those 3, in my view, have a very important impact on population. If we educate our children, not only do we, as I say, elongate the gap between where they are having children now and when they will have children in future, but they will also make better choices. And by the way, this is not to misunderstand the cultural differences between North, South, East, and Western Nigeria. But all of these can be factored into an educational arrangement that enables Nigeria to make progress. So that would be my own view about.
So there are business and investment opportunities
no doubt.
in education sector,
no doubt,
from a demographic point of view.
No doubt.
Egypt is looking to set up the largest textiles facility in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there are business and investment opportunities for men and women in this room in the textile sector? And how can they use it?
Okay. If you go around this room and touch the fabrics that we're all wearing, I would guess, and it's a guess, so forgive me even if I'm wrong, that most of it is imported.
I hope you're not talking to me.
Well, the one way me say we are going to get a CB. But Nigeria used to have textile mills. Nigeria used to have leather processing capacities. And it is not that Nigeria cannot produce cotton. And so the question has gone, and that's part of my argument about an agro-industrial complex.
As textiles as a derivative.
It's a major, look, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You don't want to go around sort of in your birthday suit, although some people seem to think it's a good idea these days, but let's pass on that piece. And so there is no doubt. The key question, however, got to be, the textile factories that failed in the past, what lessons do we learn from them and include in our industrial strategy? Let me make one thing very clear. Nigeria succeeds, and I would argue Africa is almost, not exactly, but almost guaranteed to succeed. For Nigeria to succeed, Nigeria has got to not be afraid of herself and her shadow. Why do I say this? We don't like competition. We are too quick as a country to place obstacles in the path of the dynamics of competition under the guise of we are protecting domestic industries. By the way, I am an economist. I earned a PhD longer than even I want to remember. And one of the things they taught us then was, import substitution, protection. But the world's moved on. In a market that's aiming to create and remodel itself in the image of a globally competitive economy, I have no problem with identifying areas of the economy that need to be protected. But the nature of that protection must be very clear ab initio. We're going to protect this industry for the next 5 years. It gives the industry operators a clarity about what they need to do, where they need to be by the time such protection comes off. So for me, it's, I'm not an expert in textiles, and so forgive me, I'm a macroeconomist. But I do say that if you've got 200 million people and they are to be clothed, then the imperative of a textile industry as an underbelly of your industrial expansion almost seems established. The question now becomes, so where will we get the cotton? Where will we get? That is now the question that we really need to answer. It's not that we can't grow cotton. We've grown cotton here before. The question is, what now do we need to be able to resuscitate some of that capacity? I'm sure there are people much more knowledgeable than I on agriculture, cotton, the processing thereof, who have written, not can write, have written plenty things that can guide anybody who's interested.
So you think textile sector industrialization could be a bit of a low-hanging fruit?
I don't know about low-hanging, but certainly I would argue it's an imperative.
Fantastic. What about pharmaceuticals sector?
Again,
not just opening pharmaceutical stores. dispensaries, whatever. Now I'm talking about those fancy ones in Victoria Island and Ikoyi. I'm talking about going into biotech, issues like that, things like that, preparing for the next pandemic.
Again,
in a manner of speaking.
I have no look, every economy has its needs. And without doubt, pharmaceuticals are part of that. But we also have to understand the way pharmaceuticals work. Pharmaceutical companies, as I understand them, invest a lot of money in research and development. And my understanding, and I may be wrong, but my understanding is very few of those R&D expenses make it to market success. When they do, they make it big. And they are the basis on which you then continue the R&D. And so our first question is, as a country, I'm not sure how much we are spending on R&D in that kind of context. But what we can look at is to see whether partnerships with technology owners is possible. And by the way, you know, there are sometimes when I think there are institutes all over this country that are set up to do research in many things. How we take advantage of them, or if not, if we are not taking advantage, why we are not taking, is something that we need to really very well understand. I was with a very old friend of mine. Well, when I say very old, man is 96. And he was complaining about his eyesight. And so they took him to a clinic, and they looked at it and said, this, and he went. And then he applied the thing and said, this thing is actually making my eyesight worse. And said, look, for many years, he had been drinking cassava water, how he boils it, and I was like, oh, really? And I beg they should leave him for the time being. Let him, since this one doesn't seem to be working as quickly. And I was arguing that, okay, you need to let this thing stay a few days now. I said, look, the one that I know, but the point I'm simply making is that some of this technology are not unknown to us, perhaps in a cruder form. And so what is our technology acquisition, research and development partnership strategy as a country that gives us a toehold in accessing global technology? It's not cheap. It's not free. But if we can at least start. One of the things that I draw attention to many years ago as a student in the 1980s, we saw a lot of kids our age come from Asia. Some, a very small number from China, but largely Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, India, Pakistan. And guess what? Today, these are the leaders, these are the global leaders of STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and medicine. They are the global leaders of education. And so, in my view, which goes back to your point, that we're in the fourth industrial revolution. Many people are complaining about Japa, the youngest and brightest of our kids are leaving. It's a very bad thing. I think it's certainly very inconvenient. But bad, I don't know. Because I'm one of those who takes a view that if you're going to be part of the global innovation ecosystem, you ain't going to sit down at home and be doing that. You're going to have to allow these kids to go out there. You're going to have to then figure out a solution that enables you to create training that produces their, forgive my language, replacements faster than they leave. You're going to have to think through strategies that say, how can we create a platform such that Nigerians or diaspora who've been abroad for God knows how long, who wish to contribute to this economy, not necessarily by coming home permanently, but perhaps partially. We have to think about some of these things in order to bridge that technology gap. Because what I hear you say about pharmaceuticals is that, as far as I'm concerned, it's very important, keeping body, soul together and, prospering needs access to technology. We have Nigerians abroad who have access to these technologies. We need Nigerians to have access to technology, but we have to create that platform that enables us to participate in global technology movement, but also benefits from the experience of Nigerians who are outside of these shores.
Great. Let me dip your fingers into the hot waters of FX. Now we've had the soft ones. Let's turn the heat up a little bit around FX and where the money really is. The word on the streets, and I'm using that phrase because in the stock market, you don't say rumors, you say word on the street, which means so market hearsay, to use the appropriate phrase, market hearsay. The market hearsay is that the banks are sitting on billions of dollars in domiciliary money belonging to, depending on whether you have 500 or 500,000 or 5 million share of that. How do we unlock this? Billions of dollars sitting in these monies that the banks can touch because it's not a local currency. So once I put it there, you can take it. So how do we take maybe a chunk of that money and use it to support the efforts of the central bank and the market to give us some measure of liquidity?
Well, it's good. You have the bankers here. I would have suggested you just survey all of them. Just line them up one by one. Let them come and explain what they have been doing. But on a more serious note, you need to understand, if my recollection, and again, please forgive me if my number is wrong, but my sense is that the domiciliary bank account balances are supposed to be somewhere around about $20–25 billion, something like that. And you know, one of the mistakes you shouldn't make is to say, oh, the money is just sitting down there doing nothing. In the sense that, after all, you know, we are all familiar with the central bank trying to pay back some of the monies that were used for swaps. So in other words, in a sense, the money may be being deployed, but that's not my key comment. Many people are holding dollars because of what I showed you earlier, where inflation is eroding the value of their naira assets. And it's very important to understand that why are people holding dollars? Or why is there seemingly, and I use that word advisedly, seemingly, because I haven't looked at the data properly, an increase in dollarization. But it's at the heart of it is value. That if inflation is going up 27%, 28, 29%, and you are holding naira, you better get a return that matches it. Because the simple arithmetic is this. If you have 100 naira today, whatever you can buy today, at 29% inflation means that in a year's time it will cost 129 naira. If you don't have 129 naira, then you've got a problem. You can't buy it. And so many people are increasingly resorting to dollar holdings to protect the value of their assets. And in my view, what then needs to happen are two things. And as it is, they're actually rather tied one to the other. The first is that point about real returns being positive. In other words, the yield on assets has got to match inflation. And there are two ways you can do that. Either raise the yields, but then once you raise the yields, don't forget, it would have an adverse effect on investment. Or you bring down inflation. Or both. Less than 6 months ago, we were looking at yields at 3, 4, 5%. Today, we are looking at yields at about 15, 16, 17%. So we're already seeing yields go up. Question, though, is how much further do yields need to go? I've read all sorts of things. I've even seen figures as high as 30%. I would argue that 30% is far too high. You need to quickly, this country needs to very quickly bring down inflation and then learn the lesson of not ever allowing inflation to get out of control. Let me make a point. I'm a researcher. there's something called the threshold. There's something called an inflation threshold. There is a whole series of thresholds, but there's something called an inflation threshold. And that's the level beyond which, if inflation rises, it is bad for the economy. In other words, the output of the economy will actually begin to diminish. The growth of the economy will diminish. Guess what the figure is for Nigeria? It's somewhere between 10 and at worst 14%. The threshold is somewhere between 10 and 14%, yet our inflation is about 29%. And it therefore becomes important for policymakers, be they politicians, be they technocrats, whoever they may be, that we need to go back and be looking at data and understanding these thresholds. What is the inflation threshold? What is the foreign exchange threshold? What is the budget deficit threshold? There are a whole series of thresholds that you need to understand, and they form the basis of your policy making. And so what the central bank has to do is gradually bring down inflation to that threshold level. But more than that, we then have a national resolve that inflation ever again must not go beyond that threshold. Because we are all suffering it now. We've all now seen, as I said, liquidity, money supply was growing 13%. Output was growing 1.2%. Cumulatively over a period, every year, 13% increase in liquidity, 1.2% increase in output. By the time you cumulate that, you don't need to be a genius. Two things must happen. One, inflation must go up. Two, the currency must weaken. It's as simple and you don't look. Sometimes people say, the Nigerian economy, it doesn't behave like the rest of the world. Believe me, the economy in Nigeria behaves exactly as we expect it to behave. That we may not understand all its dynamics is not to say that the economy is not behaving in the way it should behave. So, coming back to your question, I'm afraid it's two things. One, bring down inflation, and that's my own. I come from a very libertarian view of economics. If you were to ask me who's my favorite economics author, it's a guy called von Hayek. If you've ever read a book, Road to Serfdom, that's where my economic philosophical home is to be found. So for me, you bring down inflation, and you ensure that yields, real yields, are positive. You do those things, you begin to create confidence in the economy, and then people stop holding dollars and then prefer to hold Naira assets.
Should we have an economy made in our own image or in the image of the global economy?
What's our own image?
I'm just asking.
No, we need to be clear about that.
Yes.
What's our own image? You see, economics is really, at least for me, in terms of economic policy making, it's really about, we have a population. How do we better their lives? So when we start talking of the image of the world, look, the economics that many of us were taught was derived on the basis of equilibrium conditions which sometimes don't hold. But doesn't mean that those equilibrium conditions are wrong. It just means at the time you are looking, they don't hold. So you are in a disequilibrium. And so when people say to me, oh, in the image of, it's this kind of comes up, oh, Washington consensus, the market, forgive me. First things first, we ain't got an image. We ain't. We'll leave that matter. What it is, there is a, look, a small digression, please. I was looking at something the other day, and there was an argument about democracies or autocracies. And I couldn't help but laugh that this is the wrong argument. The argument should be not democracies or autocracies, is how do we feed those who are hungry? Sorry, you said there is rat. You say we have a cat. As the Chinese leader said, I don't care whether the rat is black, white, can it catch mice? It can, I beg, deploy. Simple. And so for me, our own image, as long as that statement means how do we improve the quality of lives of the large majority of our people, then I am happy for it to be in our own image.
Please give me a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let me throw this open for a few interventions from the audience. I'm looking at those in the first class, business class, and economy class in the room. These are those sitting in the first class. Okay, yeah, you're very close to the
first class.
To the first class cabin.
I'm not.
Oh, please.
Splendid lecture, sir. But there's a soft underbelly I'd like you to address. The index of failed states.
The index of
failed states.
Okay.
It classifies Nigeria as a country in low-grade civil war. And one of the key things you mentioned in the opportunity side of the 2024 outlook is the agro-industrial process, even though laws relating to land tenure is in this array. So my problem would be, who is going to invest 2 billion in the savannah lands of Taraba when there'll be killings? So I don't know how you would incorporate that into your analysis.
Okay. Thank you, sir. What I had done before now is essentially to stick to my patch as an economist. And also to say that, these are some of the things we need to do. But please remember, one of the points I made as Bosun and I started this conversation is that, in my view, the government has at least 3 responsibilities. The first of which is to ensure security. And that security has at least 2 dimensions. The first being the security from external aggression, and the second being the maintenance of law and order. Nigeria, I would argue, well, it's not I would argue, the data suggests over the last 25 years has gradually whittled away at her, I'm trying to find the right word, at maintenance of that security. And it then becomes imperative to go back to that. Because, and that's why I was very clear that what are the roles, what's the role of government? Role number 1 is ensuring security. Whether it is security from external aggression or whether it is security in terms of keeping law and order and ensuring that people can interact within a context of a legal framework that actually does deliver. So it's not as if I have forgotten that security is at the heart of it. But what now has to happen, in my view, is that I think the Nigerian elite, again, all of us here, have to really go back and start thinking very carefully, because we are approaching a stage where even ourselves, we're now in trouble. And unless we restore that secure balance, look, I was looking at the numbers. When you get the slides, you will see them. Agricultural growth year to date in 2023 was, in the first 3 quarters, forgive me, from January to September, was 0.6%. If population is growing at 3%, then you can already see that the demand side well exceeds the supply side. And so there's no way that price is not going to go up. There's no way that hunger, and which is why it wasn't surprising to see the president declare a food emergency, a food security emergency. And so at the heart of it, we like or we don't like this point about ensuring security. But it's going to take a lot more than verbalization. We are all going to have to come together and come and say, you know what, this thing no dey work again. We now need to go back and figure out how do we restore a secure environment such that people can go to the farm, they can go to the market, they can do whatever it is they want to do that is legitimate and legal. So I most certainly do not have any disputation with your comments, sir.
Thank you. Can you just indicate your name and your organization And then some folks are passing power to themselves somewhere. That's not, I'm not too sure if that's... but I'll allow you to have the floor this time around very quickly.
All right. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. My name is Yomi from Rendever, Alara City. My question is simple. With the commencement of production of the Dangote refinery, what should we anticipate as a possible impact on the economy and business across the board?
Well, I think that is, I would argue, pretty clear. So to begin with, it restores Nigeria's refining capacity. Okay? And as I'm sure you also know, there are a couple of other refineries, Warri, Port Harcourt in particular, that are supposed to come on stream anytime soon. So for me, it restores, it builds, it, you know, what refining what's the right word? Reminds me of is where rail used to be. In the 1960s, 70s, it was a very burgeoning sector of the economy, then it went away. We've seen pretty much the same thing happen in refining. Now we're bringing it back. So that's the first point. The second point to make is that at the very least, depending on the terms of the contracts between the in-country refiners and NNPC and the whole system, and please don't ask me because that's not my job. You should see, first, a more reliable supply of oil products, okay? You may see a reduction in their price. And I make that point with a massive emphasis on may see. Because don't also forget, the refiners borrowed money in dollars to build the refineries and have to repay them in dollars. And so that will have some consequence on their pricing. But at least you will say, okay, in our backyard, somewhere in Ekpe, there is a refinery that is processing 650,000 barrels of crude oil every day and turning it into product. How much of that is due to pushed into the domestic market? So for me, there is that point about revamping a sector. There is a second point about hopefully the reliability of production. And then there's the potential third point about, yeah, the cost may, and I keep making that point, may just remain within parameters that we are comfortable with.
Thank you. Sir, please, you have the floor.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Lamin Manjang, CEO, Standard Chartered Bank. Thank you, Dr. Salami, for a very insightful presentation. I just want to touch on the issue of inflation.
Okay.
Clearly, inflation is very bad for any economy, high inflation. And we saw when inflation reared its ugly head in the West, how the US Fed, the Bank of England, everybody went on a tightening spree.
Yes.
And indeed, they were able to bring inflation down. So the UK said they wanted to halve it, and they've halved it. Here in Nigeria, we've also followed suit. We increased rates, we tightened monetary policy, but to the contrary, we have seen inflation continue to increase. So which means there are other factors at play beyond simple tightening of monetary policy. You've mentioned about the increase in money supply not matched by productivity, the depreciation of the naira. So given that, how do you see the path towards achieving single-digit inflation? Because continuing tightening of monetary policy does not seem to cut it.
Okay. Well, I think you need to ask a number of questions. We need to answer a number of questions. It is public knowledge that we kind of ran up as a country. In basic economics, they say the central bank is printing money. And that's what we saw. And so once you see that, depending on whose numbers you believe, but it's roughly about 24 trillion or thereabouts. And so the first road to that is to come back within the ambit of the law. And the law is very clear. It's 5% of whatever your revenues were last year. So whatever you can borrow in 2024 from the central bank should not exceed 5% of 2023 revenues. Now, I am not unaware that there is a National Assembly bill that's not been assented to, at least as far as I know, that seeks to move that figure from 5% to another figure, whatever that may be. But it's not been assented to, so we're still working with the 2007 Act on without amendment. So that's the first point, that if you reduce or remove that, in my book, you've removed a major portion of the headache that you have. And that's why I was very clear in drawing attention to that. You can't grow liquidity 13%, grow output 1% or 1.2% and not expect to see inflation. And by the way, the point about tightening, I'm not sure we tightened. Because what you will see, which is, again, something rather interesting, if you look at the numbers, you will see the monetary policy rate go up to 18. But at some point, when it was 18, the overnight market was 3%. So that already tells you that the effectiveness of that monetary policy, that on the one hand, the central bank was signaling something, but on the other hand, the central bank's liquidity management was effectively implementing something else. So the consistency, achieving consistency between what the MPR is saying and what the markets are doing becomes a second major portion of this, of this piece. If foreign exchange liquidity improves, then of course you will expect that the central bank will be able to sell more or be a bigger participant in the market space. And of course, once you sell FX, you pull back Naira in. And then the third piece is, as a banker, you've all complained ad nauseum about this, which is the aggressive use of reserve management, of reserve ratios, be it minimum liquidity requirements to manage the balance sheet. So essentially what the central bank was trying to do was very simple. On the one hand, it was lending to the government, but it then was trying to hold the banks in order to minimize the liquidity, the push out of liquidity. So that's really the key point. So in my book, to your point that, oh, everybody was tightening, we tightened. We said we tightened, but we really did not tighten. But now, Dr. Ladi's comments on behalf of the central bank has indicated a central bank that is rededicating itself to that point about managing inflation, moving towards inflation targeting. Indeed, my argument would be Nigeria spent a lot more time doing heterodoxy than orthodoxy. What's heterodoxy? Forgive my language. Heterodoxy, so orthodoxy simply means what we normally do. Heterodoxy is, okay, something we don't usually do. So heterodoxy came into play simply because we've had a number of financial crises globally. And central banks at different points, either because of COVID, because of the great financial crisis, have had to ignore inflation for a bit in order to stimulate growth. They've done that in the West, pushed out and expanded central bank balance sheets. We did that, but when they pulled back, we continued. That's the key point. Now, we have to pull back and are pulling back. And so my own point in which responds to your question is very simple. As long as the central bank can ensure that consistency between what its monetary policy rate is saying and what the market conditions are looking like, then we're fine. Okay?
Thank you, Dan. It's the era of easy money.
You don't go.
Okay, that's the madam at the back.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and our panelists. My name is Rafiat Onitiri, a proud member of Nbcc and the acting managing director of FIC Professional Networks, a stakeholder financial inclusion outfit. Sir, my question actually centers around education. I want to find out from you, what is your take on asking the government to allow public schools pay at least a premium for education? Because my research actually found that these students at various levels do not attach any value to education at that level. And the resultant effect has to do with the various levels of illegalism that we are witnessing today. Sincerely, my organization actually signed an MOU with the Chartered Institute of Bankers to see that if we are empowering people, even at that nano or mini level, we need to give them knowledge as well. So we signed an MOU with the Chartered Institute of Bankers to ensure that people are empowered and at the same time given knowledge. At the end of the day, they are invested in themselves and the economy at large. So my own take is, do you agree that a premium should be paid on education at that level? Thank you, sir.
Now, at which level? Primary, secondary, or university?
Public, primary. Public, secondary, so to speak. Secondary. It's at that level that menace is actually high.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, Nigeria's education system is actually quite an interesting one, and it needs to be well understood. In most countries, education spend is a pyramid. It's pyramid in shape. You spend a lot at the base, you spend not that much at the top, because at the top you expect that can pay, whatever it is, sort yourself. Ours is the opposite.
Inverted pyramid.
You spend more at the top than you spend at the base. And in my view, the whole philosophy of education needs to be revisited and properly reflected upon. So let me set it up this way. Currently, in many instances, the government is the school owner. It is the school regulator. Essentially, it is the judge and the jury in his own case. I would actually rather that we begin to think through a system where the government actually can use a system of bursaries that it awards to students. It doesn't have to cover 100%, but it certainly awards to students so that it can hold the institutions accountable and demand performance. But when it is the owner of the school, it is the regulator of the school, it is the payer for the school, then in my book, it's got a problem. Now, that point about ownership may remain with the government, but certainly the management has got to move in a slightly different direction. Beyond that, as I say, a system of bursaries where the government awards a child, a student, a bursary that they can then go and use in a school of their choice. Again, forgive me, as I've said, my own economic philosophy anchors itself in a fairly market-driven approach to some of these things. And so it's not about paying a premium. It's paying the cost of education. Currently, what is being paid is too low. It doesn't really fund the system, whether it's at university level, secondary level, or almost at any level. And so we need to take a look at the funding of education in order to figure out how best to go about it. So, as I say, for me, yes, I will read your question to mean reform in education, which I would agree with. But whether it implies a premium, because a premium almost suggests that there is a benchmark level, and then we say they should pay more than that. Oh no, you want the cost of education to be met. That's that. And so, but I would say I agree with you that there is a need to review what education and the system looks like.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Donyu. I think we can take about 2 more questions. There's to be a breakfast, but now is lunchtime.
Okay.
Lunchtime. So we may have to pay Dr. Donyu both for breakfast and lunch. I'm trying to make sure that we pay only for breakfast, not lunch.
You want to avoid the premium, eh? All right. My name is Abdurrahman Yunusa. I'm with Odua Investment Company Limited. So I join others in appreciating the wonderful speech of my Egbon, Dr. Doyin Salami. I want to keep my conversation brief, but I will not want you to escape without, first talking about the issue of inverted yield. You love to see the longer tenors being cheaper than the shorter tenors in interest rate. But that suggests a very high level of confidence in the system. So you're going to spend a minute or two to tell us how we're going to move from a situation where there's a lot of disaffection and a lot of negativity to the point where people will trust so much that they're even willing, to stake their life to say the future is going to be better than the present. Okay. So that is the easier part.
Wow.
Oh. My boss knows how we engage on these matters. The bigger one, somebody talked about, is it the 200 size gorilla in the room?
200-pound gorilla.
Yes. This one is a 500 pounds,
King Kong.
Orangutan.
King Kong.
Let's talk about the King Kong. And that is corruption. Between me and you, all the numbers that are on the table, I agree with them. All the directions and the theories, I agree with them. The only missing point is corruption. You talked about how much revenue we have, 1.6 million barrel a day, multiplied by $80 per barrel, multiplied by 365, comes to a number, divided by 200 million of us, comes to a number. How much of that is actually working for us? So if we look at the corruption indices and the number of figures that have gone missing, if we follow the trend in the news, half of that number is in private pockets. So probably whatever figure you have in terms of how much we actually have as per capital income, probably you have to discount it by 50%. That now takes you to a level that you don't even want to begin to imagine. So in a nutshell, you cannot talk about Nigeria, how we're going to move forward, without addressing that very big elephant in the room. Thank you, sir.
All right. So to deal with inverted yield curve, yes, you're right. Inverted yield curve is about confidence. And I think at the heart of confidence are a number of things. The first is about a clarity of direction. Where are we going? Nigeria has what I would call directional documents. There is a national development plan. There is a national perspective plan up to 2050. I think the national development plan is up to 2025. Then the perspective plan takes you to 2050. Both of, certainly the national development plan is currently, to the best of my knowledge, being reviewed because it's a dynamic plan, so it allows for a review on a regular basis. So that's the first point. And of course, these two are being made to be consistent with the 8-point agenda that underlies the campaigns of this administration before it won power. The second thing then becomes, are we doing what we said we are going to do? Because confidence is about reliability. If you say you are going like this, and I start following you, and then you turn around, then you create a new problem for yourself. And so, at the heart of it, these guys, the new administration has come in, you know what, we are not doing fuel subsidy. Well, fuel subsidy is gone. Okay, it would appear that we are along those paths. Painful, but we're moving in that direction. We're not doing exchange rates with myriad differentials and all of that. Okay, again, we would appear to be headed in that direction. There are other pieces. The gentleman, the first questioner raised the point about security. So for me, at the heart of confidence is a government that it has a clarity about where it's going, has a clarity about how it's going to get there, is able to explain on an ongoing basis what it is doing, what outcomes it is getting, and whether it is moving in that direction. All of those things are what give you a basis for confidence to say, we know what happens. Indeed, one of the things that I think would be very interesting going forward is what in economics they call forward guidance, where markets, operators, be they individuals, corporates, are guided about what's going to happen. Really, in economics, you really don't want... There are some instances when you want to surprise people, but there are many, many more instances where you're best served having people follow you because they've been guided that this is where you're going, this is how you're going to get there, this is when you expect to get there, these are the steps you're going to take. But then not to ignore one key point, and I've made that point severally, and I won't tire of repeating it. These things have a cost, and it is imperative in an environment like ours that that cost must be appropriately paid. In other words, it can't be at the bottom of the pyramid that you are leveraging the costs. It's got to be those who are in the best position to carry that cost who must pay. So we're able to achieve that, and I think this government's kind of moving broadly in those, in those areas. I'm sure if you take a sample, everybody will have their own concerns, but for me, those would be the issues that an inverted yield curve and confidence would raise. You being a treasurer, I'm sure you understand how it is important. You don't want to wake up tomorrow and the market has scattered because somebody said, did, or whatever. And it really just doesn't make sense. So that's the first thing. But then you raise the point about corruption. And I have no doubt in my mind that corruption is a significant problem. Some would argue it's actually an existential problem. My challenge is that corruption has to be managed on a more realistic basis, not on a moralistic basis. Currently, in my view, we're managing the thing moralistically. Yeah, you accuse everybody of being corrupt. I was playing recently with a friend of mine, and they were having some fun at my expense. It happens, there is God. Maybe there are some who support a red team who say on Judgment Day we will meet some. And somebody who I hadn't even realized drew attention to something that I consider important. And he said, look, a minister of the Federal Republic earns less than $1 million a month. His convoy of cars is, if he takes a 4-car convoy, if you say his own car, a spare car, a security car, Hilux, you're already looking at the best part of 150, 200 million naira. But his salary is 1 million. Yes, now. So for me, I use this as actually probably even a bad example, but one of the key challenges that the economy in Nigeria faces is the challenge of reviewing remuneration, not just of public officers and of public
servants.
Yeah, of public servants, yes, but the entire economy. Because even in the private sector, when you look at the gaps that prevail, I'm not, and I keep going, forgive me that I keep going back and saying I anchor my economic thinking in markets. But it's important to understand what the strains and stresses that the system must take. Because you can't say, oh, people must work like this, work like this, work like this. and the remuneration is not commensurate, you create a problem. And there are too many of those dissonances that need to be straightened. It's important. I'm not even going to go into politics and how we pay for politics. There are many, there is need for a systematic understanding of how our system works and what are those things in the system that encourage some of these behaviors that we are moralistically saying we don't like. But see, I did say earlier that I'm a-religious. But I believe in incentives and incentivizing behavior. My own is not about moralizing. Yeah, we can, but it doesn't get us anywhere. We'll all sit down and be abusing each other, that's all. Question is, what incentives have we created that encourage bad behavior? You cannot incentivize bad behavior and then complain that people are behaving badly. You can't. I will tell you something. So that, because we say corruption, and everybody is pointing at the public sector, those people. A friend of mine, his company was involved in an IT project. What was the IT project? An institution wanted to revamp its procurement processes. So they awarded his IT team the project to create the system. So they created the system. Very well done. Then it came to cut over, to move from what it was to what it now will be going forward. And the guy nearly died. Why? According to him, less than 5% of the procurement of a major institution in the private sector was properly documented. Less than 5% was properly documented. Now, if that doesn't leave room for all sorts of hilariousness, then what does? And so I'm always, now I have sat a bit in the private sector, sat a bit in the public sector. In fact, when Boson started, I said, how did we get here? I always say, oh God, how did we get here? Okay, I hereby hold up my hand. I am one of those who got us here. End of story. Let's just leave that matter. But the point is this. Systemically, there is a need to review and revise how we run this system. You can't sit down and say a judge who has spent 30, 40 years, his income doesn't cater for the basic needs at that level. In fact, if I remember again another friend, a very senior lawyer, was telling us about a judge who, in the days before they now have, they are now automating, or at least they are now digitizing. But things used to be written by hand. And so hand-wrist illnesses was a major problem. And by the time they retired, their medical cover was seldom enough to look after that. So tell me, unless we sit, I'm not disputing your point about a need for clarity and attention to this matter, but I am saying that it is imperative that as you look at the system, it's important to get some of its attributes to be consistent with incentivizing the kind of behavior that we would like to see. Right now, we incentivize the behavior that we are seeing. That's my own view. We incentivize the behavior we are seeing. So let no jumping up and down occur. I'm sure you remember there's a joke about a badly positioned chicken when the breeze blows. May our chicken not be badly positioned when the breeze blows.
Well, we know what happens next, and that's Let's leave it at that. I hope on that note. Let's take the final question in the room from the gentleman in white.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shola Faladu.
Online.
I operate in the upstream sector. Shola Faladu.
Yes.
I operate in the upstream sector. Dr. Salami, I have known you for a long time. I've been a fan of yours for, over 25 years. I admire the work that you do. I do not have any information at my disposal today to change that position. I remember in business school many years ago, you always talked about what the government needed to do to change, to enhance the economy of the nation, what the government needed to do, right? And, some of us tagged along with your thoughts at the time. It's common knowledge that the previous government was a train wreck from an economic policy perspective, right? And I'm going to put you on the spot, but permit me to do so. Sometimes we have to be frank with ourselves, right? I don't permit you. You were a part of that government. Economic advisor to the president, MPC member. How did you survive in that toxic environment? Why didn't you just walk away? I mean, why didn't you walk away? I struggled with that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I think it's a very fair question. It's a very, very fair question. My view has always been that that as many views must be canvassed and listened to in order for us to get the best out of the system. There is no point in going into detail, though I became, forget that one. I was going to say enjoyed, but I have been enlightened by my participation. Whether it's on the MPC, at least the MPC, I used to have to write a statement at the end of every MPC meeting. Most of the meetings, I suspect I was on the losing side of many of the votes. But I would explain why I voted the way that I voted. With the Economic Advisory Council, even though our presentations to Mr. President was supposed to be private to him, but at least on 2 occasions, those presentations, I would argue, were leaked. At least they became public knowledge. I didn't sanction it, and I don't know that anybody that I know sanctioned it. So again, you had a view, or you had an opportunity to see what my views and those of my colleagues with whom I worked, on that advisory council. The only occasion when I didn't have a public persona was as economic advisor to President Muhammadu Buhari. But again, on one occasion, which I felt very bad about, because I think it was the Kaduna State Governor who wrote a letter to the president and put something that had been discussed and which represented my views. Now, for me, if everybody says, oh, we're walking away, then that viewpoint is not at the table. And I would honestly say to anybody, it's useful. I only had 18 months of being an advisor. No, that's not correct. I had 4 years of being an advisor if I take the period when I chaired the Economic Advisory Council. But there were 1 or 2 things that we did that I found very useful. Whether eventually they use it or not, the president asked us on one occasion that he made a statement that, we wanted to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. And he then set the Economic Advisory Council the task of articulating a strategy for it. And we did, in, I would argue, record time. But the amount of work and I don't think many people have actually read that piece of work. Till today, it is one of the pieces about which I am most proud. That a council of which I was a member was able to sit down and say, look, if Nigeria wants to remove 100 million people out of poverty over a period of 10 years, this is how we should do it. Now, whether a succeeding government will eventually come and look at it and update it and use it, I hope so. And so for me, at the heart of your question is, my own answer to your question is, the toxicity guy, where power stays, they don't go and be playing there. Power is about resources and about a whole host of stuff. You know, but my view remains that there is a point of view that I represent, and I think that point of view should be at the table to be considered. Whether, as my boss used to say to me, Salami, if you think I don't understand what you're saying, then you're wrong. And I'm an advisor. I will advise this is the way. And then the government sometimes will agree, and sometimes it will not. In 2020, during COVID, the president actually, at least as far as I understood it, signed off on liberalization of fuel prices. But what was then done was something called modulation. Now, how that evolves. So, but for me, at the heart, my direct answer to your question is very simple. There are viewpoints that I think need to be at the table for consideration. Whether they will be adopted or not, that's a different matter. But their absence means they cannot be considered.
A round of applause for Dr. Doyin Salami on behalf of the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce. We thank you very much. So, on that last note, that the notice is that there's only one rule. Oh, actually, two rules. The first rule is that the boss is always right. The second rule is that if you're in doubt, read the first rule all over again. On that note, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, Director General, and others. Tunji, you take it from here. Thank you so much. A round of applause, please.
We will give another round of applause to Dr. Doyin Salami and Mr. Bosin Omofai. That was a very well thought out session. And I like the fact that eventually Dr. Salami was put on the spot, because we're actually expecting that question to come up, and I thought he was going to escape. Okay, we're on the home run. The next item on the agenda is for me to invite our President Chairman of Council, Mr. Ray Atele, FRPA, to come and appreciate the guest speaker and the moderator with their plaques. Mr. President, over to you. May we appreciate our President, please. First. We take it up. Yeah, take it up, take it up.
We have the gifts. Yes, I'm very, very sure that we can't wait for breakfast. And so we need to cut out long speeches, hand over a few appreciation plaques, and then go have breakfast. The rest will continue after this.
Is it Dr. that is there? Is this Dr. Salami? Yes. A round of applause for Mr. Bosin Omofai. The media insisted that you should have this. It's going to be in the papers. Thank you. Dr. Doyin Salami, you're next. The young, very young Ijebu boy who studied economics. Thank you. Finally, Mr. President, you need to stay there. Sorry, I have the speaker, so I can command as I wish for now, until you raise the bar during ESCO meetings. A few pictures. Dr. Salam, you need to wait. Please, Bosin, please come forward. Just pictures. Mr. President, Deputy President Akin Oshuntoki. Our sponsors, MDs of our sponsors, we'll take them in batches. Odua Investment, Tangerine. May you come forward. First Ally, the CEOs. May we clap for them, please. Capital Field, representative of Capital Field. That's the first batch. Our next sponsors take a cue. Here's Insurance Group, Tangerine, MPF Microfinance Bank, and Wema Bank. Please, you can. Next sponsors, MPF Microfinance, Here's Insurance, Tangerine, TNP, and Wema Bank. Lagos, wow, the tax man. How did I forget that? I'm in trouble. Lagos Internal Revenue Service. Mr. Subar, please. No. Standard Chartered, Mr. Majang, please. Oh, Mr. Subar actually came by himself. Wow, the tax man is here. Not represented, just by himself. The deadline of January 31 still subsists, as that threat was made in the advertorial. Okay. Thank you so much, your sponsors, for sponsoring this event. Okay, next, so the guest speaker and moderator can leave. Mr. President, stay behind. ESCO members. Mr. President and ESCO members. ESCO members, please. Members of ESCO.
Good job.
Okay, next. Madam from CBN representatives, with Deputy President and Mr. President, please. He's left. Call him if you call him. Dr. Salami. Bosin, please. We need to do our media run, so please. Dr. Salami. Dr. Salami, we're waiting for you. Next on queue, members of the programs committee. The committee that used their body fluid, tears and blood to get this event put together. Members of the programs committee, Vice Chairman Biroba, please on queue. Program committee members with the Mr. President and the Deputy President.
Committee members, please. Tunji, is that all? Okay.
The DG and members of the head office staff and DG. DG Dr. Ebere Njoku and our staff with Mr. President and Deputy President. DG Ebere Njoku. Ladies and gentlemen, lunch, that was meant to be breakfast is served on the right side. So you have the membership lounge on the right, you turn in for lunch. HQ staff, Damilola. HQ staff, Shegun Olujobi, Empire. Shegun, we're waiting. HQ staff. And that's the end.
Honorary Life Vice President, some of them are
Okay. Olabinto. Okay. Honorary Life President, Chief Olabinto, and Mrs. Anai. Chief Olabinto and Ms. Alai, our Honorary Life President, please. Vice President. Yes, sir. Former Treasurer. Who did I say? Okay. I think it's gone. Mr. Shola Oyetayo. Mr. Shola Oyetayo, immediate past treasurer. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for this event. We can just go for lunch at the membership lounge on the right after this building, the same floor. Thank you, Mr. President.
well done as usual.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
DG, vote of thanks. DG, we forgot vote of thanks.
It's too late.
We forgot vote of thanks.
vote of thanks.
Yes. Oh my God.
It's okay. Everybody's happy and tired.
Was there now? It's okay. Then I think some of these pictures.
Oh yeah, and I think there are too many.
Honorary Life President. You could have done them. And you call them Otikwe.
It's okay.
You can put them together. We have this kind of big events. Anytime we have this kind of big events, we should use a good